This meeting is being recorded.
I left the mouse in.
Yeah, I noticed
partway through too, and I thought, it's going to be dumb to move it now. This is our 30th interview.
Yeah, we're still leaving.
Yeah, you'd think we'd be good at it by now.
Weddings are fantastic. They're this rare opportunity to step out of the day-to-day and say to someone, hey, I kind of like you. We've been videographers in the wedding industry here on Vancouver Island for over 10 years now. And one of the most common things we hear from couples and other vendors who want to plan a sustainable event is, I'd love to, but I just don't know how.
So in this series, we're going to explore how to actually have a sustainable event. And with help from vendors all over Vancouver Island and across the wedding industry, we'll talk about how to create and celebrate a sustainable wedding from the planning stages to the footprint that's left behind. From the big picture to the small details, we'll provide tips and tricks for how to get you sustainably wed. We've covered a lot of ground in this series, and if you've watched all of our other episodes, by now you should have a pretty good sense of how to create a sustainable wedding with a pretty low footprint. But in this episode, which is our last episode, we're going to push things one final step to talk about how you can celebrate in a way that actually leaves a positive footprint. It's something that doesn't always come up in planning a sustainable event. We talk about reducing our footprint, minimizing our impact, yet we don't often talk about leaving a positive mark. But something that we've learned as we've put this series together is that you can celebrate in a way that actually creates a positive legacy on your guests, your community, and on the environment. And let's start with your guests. How can you leave them with something on your wedding day that helps them feel your love and connection long after the day is over? It's a deep idea, but luckily, as you'll know if you've been following along in the series, when you have a deep question, there's one person to go to. One of the things that I love that I've seen in your ceremonies before is the couple writes letters for their guests and gives those letters to the guests at the ceremony. They're all personalized, and I often don't see what the messages on those letters are, but people are crying all the time, so they must be very meaningful. And I love the idea of giving somebody a gift like that as maybe an alternative to a favor. Can you tell us what that process is like and how couples can make that happen?
Well, so imagine if the people who are coming are the most important. So if you're going to put your priority list together of all the things that are important in your wedding day, and there's a good chance that the people who are coming are going to be right at the top. Yeah. So if you put your energy into those people, like how do you do that?
Yeah.
So you can do there are all kinds of activities and games and stuff you can plan, but really what you want to do is you want to let everybody know that you really, really, really appreciate them. Mm-hmm. And so one of the best ways to do that is to involve them somehow. So I've had couples who've done this where they write letters to all of the guests who are there, a letter to each person about why they're important to them and why they matter and what they mean to them. So there's a fair amount of intention that has gone into those letters. Yeah. So that the energy that they might have spent somewhere else on things like guest favors or whatever, sure. They're not doing that. They're putting that into creating these letters because the letters take time. Yeah. But one of the things that the letters do is it gives you the ballast, to realize exactly why you're inviting these people. Right. Why are they coming? Why have you chosen them? Yeah. And so it's work, but it gives you a real sense of gratitude for the people who are in your life, and so it's pretty wonderful that way. But the times that we've done it, people have been overwhelmed because it goes back to the gratitude for the people you have in your life, the love you have for them, the support that they've given you and that they're going to give you. Yeah. But as far as a takeaway, something that's that personal, I just can't think of anything better.
What an incredible gift to give your guests.
Yeah. And when something like that happens in a ceremony, the energy level, you can almost feel the love just go up, 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 up. Yeah. And it's absolutely wonderful.
Letters at the ceremony is just one idea for leaving your guests with something that they'll treasure. And there are lots of other ways to do that. But let's talk now about leaving an impact on our community. How can we let the love and joy that we feel at a wedding ripple out to others? Well, if you've got some leftover flowers, why not share them with other people? Luckily, there's a company across Canada that can make that happen easily for you. Kaylin started Rebloom in 2014 because she was tired of seeing flowers getting thrown out after events. She tested the idea first in Calgary and then expanded it to cities across Canada, including here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, that's really how it all came about, was just about the environmental impact that would happen from a wedding where you're having this grandiose event, or it could even be small backyard. But then where do the flowers go? Like how do you repurpose them? How do you make them bring joy into your community? And that's really what it was about with the wedding couples, was your joy, your love that you have right now is going to make other people happy. So that's really honestly how it all started, because I just hate floral waste because they're so beautiful and they should be enjoyed for days and not hours.
You can work with Rebloom to select a charity or organization to donate your flowers to, which means that you can select something really personal or meaningful for you. Another thing that's really cool about this service is that they recollect the flowers and manage the composting process. And you can even keep the soil they create once it's ready.
So we collect the flowers, we bring them back to the studio, and we have studios across Canada. And then if it's a late event, we usually wait till the next day because I don't want someone trying to arrange flowers at 3 a.m.
That's fair.
Yeah, right. So we have them repurpose the flowers. So we make smaller bedside table arrangements. It totally depends on the charity though, or where we're donating, because hospitals and hospices and cancer care and they all have different rules on the type of flower that you can get. So then the flowers are delivered, they're enjoyed. Depending on the flower, it's probably anywhere from 4 to 7 days. And then we collect the flowers. We have local facilities that we use, and then it takes time and it creates soil. And then we ask them if they want to donate it to a local landscaper.
Nice.
A family garden, anything like that. Especially if it's a funeral, sometimes they really love having that soil back.
Yeah, I love that what you're doing turns something that is often, we don't really think of flowers as a single-use item, but they are a single-use item, but it turns it into something that's totally circular, which I love. These flowers are grown in dirt, and then they're used at the wedding, and then they're given a second life, bringing joy, and then they're composted and made back into dirt, which could then grow more flowers, which is amazing. That's really wonderful.
Donating florals is one way to spread the love in your community, but there are other ways as well, and you can lean on your vendors to help you with this. The Parkside Hotel in downtown Victoria is a great example of a group of people who actively seek to have a positive impact in their community, and they take a really holistic view of sustainability to do this. Monique is a conference services coordinator and resident expert on weddings at the Parkside, and she offered to show us around.
Yeah, so even just having your event at a carbon neutral facility is already taking one step closer to having a more sustainable wedding. Even just working with the vendors that we suggest, it's because we don't just, pick a name out of the hat for our vendors. We actually do a lot of research to make sure they have the same goals and standards as us. So you can always do that. I also always tell all of our wedding couples, if they do want to do a sustainable wedding, that we're here every step of the way to help them achieve the goals that they want, not only the outlook and the beautiful wedding, but how is it going to fully impact the rest of the world and the environment. So it's definitely a full encompassment of just making that change.
So what impact does the Parkside want to have on the community?
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely do want to have an impact that we're leaders in sustainability, and that I think sustainability kind of gets a bad rep almost of like, oh, it's too hard, I'll do it tomorrow. Right. But it's actually really just as simple as recycling, composting, even planting pollinator plants in your garden so the bees can go and pollinate. It's really just easy things that you can do every single day that will make such a big impact. And I think just to have that kind of ripple out into the community will be really great.
Speaking of bees and pollinator plants, the Parkside actually has beehives in their rooftop garden. And I love the idea that these bees can actually play a role in keeping weddings sustainable and beautiful. You have a cool Adopt a Bee program going on. What is that? And do I have to bring it into my house?
No, you don't need to bring it into your house. So we're doing it for our Earth Week here. And really what it is this to really promote how important bees are in our ecosystem and how they help really pollinate our plants. So you can buy a bee for $5 or by donation, and all the proceeds are going to go to FED. And what FED does is help build community gardens in the downtown core to help those pollinators get around and have enough food and pollinating. So that's really great. Yeah.
Awesome. And I love that the idea, especially using local produce and local and seasonal flowers, I like the idea that the bees here are making that happen.
Absolutely.
And so the bees at the hotel are helping the flowers and the produce that you're having at your wedding.
Yes.
That are then coming and making your wedding more beautiful and tasty.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what's also really great is, they don't just help pollinate the flowers here, but they can really go quite far and pollinate maybe that vegetable that you're having at your wedding.
That's so cool. I think sustainability, when we look at sustainable efforts, they're best when they're circular like that. Yes. Everything comes back around in a circle, and the bees are just the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So obviously letting bees ripple out and make an impact on the community and environment is a great thing, but it's a bit abstract. So if you want to have a really tangible and direct way to make a positive impact after your wedding, the best way that we've found is to calculate your carbon emissions and then offset those emissions after your wedding. And that might sound difficult, but it's made super easy by an incredible tool called the Wedding Footprint Calculator, developed by a group called Less Stuff, More Meaning in Australia. Sandra Hendry is a photographer and was the brains behind the calculator.
So, what is the Wedding Footprint Calculator, and how did you come up with the idea to start this?
I was seeing a lot of information floating around on the internet that a wedding creates this much waste, or these are some top 10 eco-friendly wedding tips. And whilst they look beautiful and are inspirational, I was thinking, well, how do we know that they are actually impactful? Is it more fashion-based? Is it more something that looks great on social media? Or is there actually some truth behind these information, these tips that are out there? And so I thought, let's actually get some science behind this. And I hired an ecologist, and she put the Wedding Footprint Calculator together for us. And so then she was able to really put all the maths and the science together so that we have a really detailed, accurate picture of the impact of our wedding. And with that information, then you are able to make the best choices available, make decisions on what will have the most impact when you're planning your wedding.
You can find this calculator online. You go on and it's going to ask you some questions about your venue, travel and accommodation, questions about your outfits, catering, decor, florals, vendors, all of the things. And at the end, you're going to get an estimate of your carbon footprint, as well as how you compare to the average wedding. Now, by the way, this is based on the average Australian wedding, but the average approximately 100-person wedding in Canada or the US is going to be pretty similar. And if you use this throughout your planning, it can help you make more informed choices about your wedding.
So when would you recommend a couple input their information in the calculator? Should it be at the beginning, at the end, both, in the middle?
Any time is better than not using it all, but obviously, ideally, if you were able to use the calculator right at the beginning of your wedding planning process, then you'll understand what factors actually have the biggest impact, those being the number of guests, and also where people are travelling from and where products are coming from. So if you can take that into account right from the beginning, then that will really guide your process of how you put your wedding together.
In a lot of cases, air travel is going to be the single biggest category of emissions. And you might look at that and think that we're saying you need to just uninvite everybody who doesn't live close by. But that's not necessarily what we're recommending here.
A wedding is one of those last traditions that we do really honour in our modern world. And like you said, it's one of those few times when people do gather from all around the world. And often you may not see them again for a very long time afterwards. So it is a really special time, and we wouldn't want to take that away from anyone. And that's where a simple carbon offset and planting some trees is really easy, and it feels great. And that's one of the things that we say at Less Stuff More Meaning, is that your wedding can share the love between each other, but also the world at large, so between our global community and our environment as well. So it is really a beautiful love-filled event, and by making your wedding eco-friendly, you're actually being activists, but in a really positive, joy-filled way, and that feels amazing.
Sandra mentioned offsets there, and that's the last step of the wedding footprint calculator. Once you've reduced your footprint and had your event, you can calculate that remaining carbon footprint and purchase offsets for what's left behind. But before we go any further, we wanted to chat more about what exactly carbon offsets are. So I asked Jill Doucette, Executive Director of the Synergy Foundation, to tell us more about them.
Offsets shouldn't be a way to say, oh, well, it'll just be easier to buy offsets rather than choose local sustainable produce.
Right.
So I don't believe that's how offsets should be placed. But of course, like you said, some people are going to have to travel there. You're going to have to eat something.
Yeah.
So ideally, you can shrink the footprint down to as little as possible. Maybe 25, 50% of what it would have been without your conscious choices.
Yeah.
Then with that remaining carbon footprint, you could look to support an initiative through carbon offsets. Verified carbon offsets are essentially projects that would not have happened without offset funding.
Right.
There are some really fantastic projects, including installing solar panels on local schools in Canada, to contributing to the preservation and conservation of forests, allowing land trusts and nature conservancies to purchase more land and put that essentially into protection.
Awesome.
So there are fantastic projects out there. You want to have verified carbon offsets if you can. Ones that have been third-party accredited to meet the rigorous standards of an offset.
Right.
And those are available through a number of companies. Carbon Zero, Offsetters, and others can help you find good projects to support that match your values.
Awesome. That was going to be my next question, is are all offsets built equally? Or is there a range of things out there on the internet that you can find?
There's a range of different types of offsets out there. Some verified, some not. Some are international, some are more local to you, and so it's really about finding projects that match your values. If you can't find an offset project, because offsets right now are in high demand, if you can't find an offset project to support necessarily, then you can find a nonprofit that are doing similar activities and contribute to their work in more of a direct way. And it may not be a ton per ton direct offset, but you can be having that positive impact by contributing to the work that they do every day.
Awesome.
I've got to say that in most cases I've seen, offsetting the carbon footprint of a wedding is a lot less expensive than you'd expect. It's an easy and quick way to leave a positive impact, and you could build this support right into your wedding budget. So you've reduced your footprint, you've had a great event, you've offset your carbon, maybe you've donated your flowers and adopted some bees. There's one last thing you can do to ensure you leave a lasting impact after your wedding, and that's to share what you've learned. Show other people what's possible and inspire others to do the same. And to be honest with you, I think this responsibility starts with vendors.
And I feel like we as an industry also have a responsibility to really represent a diverse range of couples and weddings. So it's very tempting just to show the most styled weddings or the most lavish weddings. And I think that's where vendors fall in a bit of a trap, is that we end up showing only the high-end weddings, but but then we're doing the environment and the whole industry moving forward a real disservice by doing that. So I think it's something that all of us vendors can be more mindful of.
Responsibility is the last thing we want to talk about in this series, because this is a big industry and there's a lot of change to be made. So as we finished this project, we asked vendors a question. Who's responsible for making change? Is it couples, vendors, industry organizations, governments, or someone else entirely? And this time, the answers we received didn't surprise us. The most common answer we heard was everyone. We all have a role to play in making weddings more sustainable.
I think it's a little bit of everybody, to be honest. I mean, if the couples didn't demand it, businesses aren't going to feel the pressure to change. But at the same time, businesses have a responsibility to their community to be proactive. So it takes a little bit of everything.
Everyone's responsible. You know, like corporations are responsible and consumers are responsible, and like everyone in between is responsible for making those healthy decisions.
Totally.
Yeah, I like to think the vendors have a great responsibility and opportunity to do things the right way. I think we often are kind of molding the decisions of our clients, and then clients do choose their vendors. So choosing ones that have that mindset, I think, is important.
This is the challenge with anything to do with sustainability is there are multiple parties involved, and we all need to bear a little bit of the weight on our shoulders if we want to make a difference.
There's a lot of work to be done, but the good news is that so many people are making change. And the vendors that we spoke to throughout this series are feeling optimistic.
It feels like every week a new flower farmer is popping up. And every week I'm hearing another vendor talk openly about sustainability on their page. Yeah. So it feels like we're kind of in a bit of like a swelling moment for this conversation about sustainability. And then add into that the creativity that has been forced out of people in the last 2 years. I think we're at a really fun and really crucial time for actually changing industry standards for sustainability.
The thing that makes me most optimistic that the wedding industry can change is I think the clients are changing. There's a lot of discussion in the circles that I'm a part of how's Gen Z gonna get married, right? This is an excellent question, because in many ways the models that we have to default to around why have a wedding, what does a wedding look like, they don't work. You know, they come from problematic places. They come from places that hurt other people, they hurt the environment, they hurt a couple's goals or their lived experiences. So I think that the market is changing. That can be a very frustrating answer because it's slow in my experience. And speaking very much from my experience, it can often feel like I'm shouting into the void, which again, I say as a cis straight white woman who does not live actively with disability. So if I feel that way, I can only imagine what other folks who don't have that lived experience feel like. And that's, I think, where we see a lot of burnout. So I'm optimistic that the wedding industry will change just because I think that clients are asking smarter questions, more challenging questions, and they're looking for new models.
And as we've gotten further and further into this climate catastrophe, apocalypse, whatever you want to call it, we've been told, don't do this, wait, don't do that, do this. And people are scrambling. Industries are scrambling to invent new products. Scientists are scrambling to invent new ways to survive in what we're doing. And all of us want to be able to still hold on to the little joys that we have, getting married, having kids, and like the achievements that we had before all of this started to happen to make us feel a little bit more normal. And so I think that, feeling okay with not knowing the answer is really important, and making mistakes. Totally. We're gonna have slip-ups. We're gonna sell products that might not necessarily be the best, but ultimately if we keep learning together and keep working together to actually build a sustainable future, then I think we'll be okay, hopefully.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
And it's on that cautiously optimistic note that we're gonna end this series. And I hope that throughout all of these episodes, you've picked up some new ideas, some tips and tricks, and maybe a new way of looking at weddings. And honestly, I hope that in a few years, the term sustainably wed won't even be a thing. Hopefully, a sustainable wedding is just what every wedding is. And if vendors, couples, organizations, and everyone else can make that happen, our industry will be able to have a positive impact that we can all feel good about.